the big one that probably stands out there, obviously we see how tight these games are in the Champions League. There's a bit of an outlier there. We don't normally see that. You know, you beat us 4-1 after that 0-0 there. But the big one that probably stood out was probably the semi-final. So it was almost like another semi-final. We managed to beat a team again who were probably on another level for us. And I always remember that game because I think it started getting built up as like Rafa and Jose with these tacticians and they were trying to outdo each other. And I always remember Chelsea, that game actually went to a dime. They did something they'd never done before. And yet we ended up winning the game. But I always thought, that's a manager maybe trying to do something different to show I'm tactically better. You know, when a manager, you get that feeling. Did you feel that?
Yeah, I think the reality was at that point that Liverpool would probably, and Jose and the Rafa thing had probably got under our skin. I don't remember, we were such a machine in the early parts of this, when you talk about 2005 and 6. I don't remember too many dramatic tactical things where we went, let's change against these. We were so confident in what we were doing. Everybody knew their roles and it kind of worked. And I think probably you were the one team, as you said there before, that really gave us an issue that maybe forced us into trying to do something different. And the reality is when that happens, it can also become a negative in the end. You're trying to do something that you're not used to. And I remember those times like trying to find a solution against a team that's really organised. And then I felt that once that tide had turned, I think you'd had the ghost goal night at Anfield, where the atmosphere was something that I'd never felt in football before. And I think because you got the better of us that night, with that atmosphere, it was like, every time you come to Anfield, you're getting this. And you kind of added another intensity to the game and made it so hard to play against.
Well, this is, I mean, we were talking about the Mourinho, Benitez, and I mean, obviously Chelsea come out on top, but I think for us even to compete with Chelsea, being totally honest, because I think there was a big gulf between the squads, the sets of players, what Chelsea could do with the transfer market. So in some ways, actually quite proud that you've still got a few victories there. But the big thing that really stands out is their actual goals per game. So you look at that, I mean, Chelsea, with all that attacking talent, Frank, Robin, Duff, Drogba, less than a goal a game. Obviously ourselves, how many clean sheets were in it. And what that did was it shows you how tight the games were, obviously, but how intense they were. It almost felt, if you scored the first goal, it almost felt the game was over. Yeah. But the pressure for me as a defender, thinking I'm up against these great players, if we concede, it's a bit like, that's it. We're not going to score against Czech, John Terry, you know, Carvalho. But what we've done here, Frank, actually, is obviously it went on for so many years and there's so many different players within this. What we've picked, the Liverpool team and a Chelsea team from that era who actually played the most games there. So it's not an exact science or an exact team, but I just wanted to speak about some of the tactics from our point of view and what we try to do. So I'm going to put myself in here at centre-back. Now, from my role, I was under strict instructions against Chelsea that even though we had Alonso, Stevie Gerrard, Mascherano, maybe a Didi Hamann in there, all top players, under no circumstances would I ever, or Sami Hyypiä, or any of the back four, look to play a ball into midfield to feet. Never. Because of the strength of yourselves. So if you get in there with your position, Makelele, Essien, because
you want me in?
No, but I mean, what I'm saying is you were so dominant physically, and the actual counter-attack in your team is devastating. So from a tactical point of view, we basically just went direct for you. And we used to target Ashley Cole. So Ashley Cole in that position will be normally up against Kite. Now, whether it was from Pepe Reina, myself, Sami Hyypiä, if we played a long ball there, we knew probably 7 times out of 10, Kite would win it against Ashley Cole, just the sheer physicality of it. And then it would be, could we get Stevie Gerrard to pick up a ball anywhere beside Makelele? Because when you played against Chelsea, they were so strong defensively. You felt like the only bit of space was either side of Makelele in that positions. I mean, did any of that ring true? Were you aware how direct we were?
Absolutely rings true, and I felt it, and I remember, and I think that one of the worries when you have the 4-3-3 that we have with 2-8s, we want to be aggressive. So it effectively becomes a match-up in midfield where my job would be more, can I push up towards Mascherano, and then Makelele and Essien would try and push up and go to lunch. That's a man-for-man kind of job in midfield. Yeah. The frustration I always remember is whenever I moved into that area, I'm going to try and get close to Mascherano. In the end, I'll probably go, I'm not going to bother, because I knew exactly what you were going to do. And you were either going to chip it in to Dirk Kuyt And so if I go all the way into Mascherano, I'm leaving that area even bigger. Or at times, because you did have it where you'd fire it through centrally and maybe go into, if Stevie can get there, or into a front man and then Stevie's coming off the front of him. So it was a really frustrating thing for us, for me as a midfielder.
Did you feel it was a tactical battle then? It's interesting here. I think they almost made it that, Liverpool, because they felt they were inferior in terms of personnel, and maybe you felt you were, on paper, the stronger side.
Yeah, I think so. I don't have massive memories of, like, let's make this tweak for Liverpool. I think there would always be aware of Gerrard, aware of the aerial threat, aware of all these things. But I don't remember that. Maybe that's because of, as I say, maybe where we felt we stood. But I definitely remember the feeling of the game. And what Jamie's saying there, it's quite simple stuff. That's not rocket science, and that's not to belittle it. Some of the best tactics can be the simple idea, repetitively done well. And it just stifled us. And I never felt, there were two things. I never felt like I could really get to them because I think they're just going to miss me out. So that leaves you in a bit of a 50-50 area. And I also thought when we tried to build, because of the Anfield factor, because of the match-up in midfield, as much as you couldn't play centrally, because we would have probably jumped on it, I always felt that a little bit there. I never felt really there was a space where I could just drop down, I'm just going to put my foot on the ball and try and dictate. Because
Anfield's a tight pitch, isn't it?
It wouldn't allow it. Do you know what I mean? Like the crowd, and to be one of Stevie's great attributes was speed to cover ground quickly. So if you're ever around him, he could close you down quickly. So we might have ended up kind of resorting to what you do. If you look back at those games, you might see a bit of you go along there, we win it back, we try that. And that sort of real simplistic game.
Would you count him as one of your toughest opponents?
Absolutely.
Stevie, we always talk about whether you could play together, but actually, what was it like to play against him?
No, I think you just got to appreciate every player for themselves, and to play against him. It was, for me, unbelievable talent, but the physical capacity of Stevie. And he really, I felt, fed off that Anfield crowd. And it was all, I remember moments of thinking, if he faces you up 1v1, or if he gets just off the back of you, you're not going to get back at him. And obviously his talent, because I think he was an incredible player. So, yeah, absolutely right up there.
Frank's talking about us actually being on top of them and being aggressive. And if there was one word that I could sum up with Rafa Benitez, especially in big games, was always being compact. Yeah. We were so tight, it was very difficult for any team to play through us. But the one thing we used to work on, especially with you, Frank had this ability, or he used to do it sometimes, the ball would come to him, and you'd basically, from this position, the ball would come into you, whether it was into Drogba or from a player, and you'd go one touch straight over the top. And we got caught out in a Charity Shield game. I think Crespo scored, actually, and the ball went between me and Steve Finn, and he went through and scored the goal.
Was it Shevchenko?
May have been Shevchenko, you may have been, yeah, you might be right. But it was, so when you talk about the tiniest details, so imagine I'm centre-back, we're trying to stay compact, we're not trying to let any space in here, in midfield. So if the ball goes to SEM, we're fine. If the ball goes to Makelele, we're fine. So we're talking about the tiniest details. If the ball goes to Lampard, back. So you've got to, when you talk about the concentration at the highest level, it's not just like, oh, we do this against this team. No. There's individual players in here who can do different things. SEM wasn't capable of playing that pass. Makelele wasn't capable of playing that pass. So the passes they're going to be playing are maybe shorter passes into the front players. So if we're thinking, every time it comes to a Chelsea player, we think he might go one touch, or we'll do that. Well, now that ball goes into Joe Cole's feet there. So it's like that constant, that's what I'm trying to explain, the intensity of the games. I think if we watch the games back, we'd all sit there and think, this is an awful game.
Yeah, but probably quite tiring, mentally draining to play in as well.
Honestly, Dave, and the attention to detail, the intensity of those games is something that I'll treasure.
And physically draining when you're up against him, Didier Drogba.
Yes.
Talk us through that.
The Didier Drogba matchups, where I always say this about Drogba, I actually love him. An amazing player. But it almost felt like when I'm training for Liverpool and I'm training against a Torres or a Suarez, you get to know every sort of trick they've got in the book because you train with them every day. It got a little bit like that with Drogba, only because it felt like I was playing against a teammate because I'd played against them that much. You know, you're playing about 6-7 times a season. But the thing with Drogba was, when he was on it, he was unplayable. You couldn't... If he played well, I always say this to actually my own son about he's a centre-back. Sometimes when the striker plays really well, it doesn't necessarily mean you've had a bad game. Sometimes it's just great play by him. And he was like that, where he was unstoppable. But when a game would start, obviously you know him a lot better than me, I was an aggressive player, but I wouldn't be trying to wind him up, because once he could flick a switch and be a completely different player. Or sometimes he'd actually have a game where he wasn't quite on it. I mean, did you get that feeling with him when he was on it? He was...
No, but when he was on it, and they're the ones that stick in your mind with him, because he was on it in so many big games for us that he made the difference. And there would be, I think it's a bit of a typical trait, can be, of a centre forward, that if they're not doing that specials thing and they're not really occupying defenders and making things happen, you can kind of go, come on, I want more from you. And I think maybe even temperamentally, Didier might have gone, you know, I can't get the better of him today and those things. But what I will say about him as well, that pass you talk about that I used to make, the beauty of Didier was I could get that pass wrong a lot and he would make something of it.
Yeah.
And it'd even give you the fear that it's going to go in. So I would know that. I would say to him in the warm-up sometime, first one, yeah, and he'd go like the first one. So he knows I'm receiving from my left, from my right back, and it's coming across me on Makalele, and I'm just going straight in behind. And as soon as you do that and you talk about dropping off, then you go, OK, now even for me, I can start going, next one, now can I play through? And so I think for him, he made a lot of that stuff. I think a couple of assists I had for him, I think at Wembley, or it's like a semi-final. I actually hit this volley, which had snow on it by the time we got there. And it ended up looking like a great pass because he went there, he bullied, I think it was the Arsenal defender, made a great goal out of it. People go, oh, great assist. I've just lifted it into space. And I think what you did sometimes at Liverpool, when I talk about not feeling that comfortable on the ball, I think you negated the space and you made it really tight in here.
Yeah.
And I remember, especially being around the halfway line, when sometimes you think you can pull away, and if I'm here and I'm going, no, I can pull away here, and he might not want to come with me. There was nowhere to go. I kind of tried to pull away, and you go, Stevie there, Alonso there, it's tight there, and you couldn't get any control of the game. It just felt like there was a real pressure about you.
I mean, talking about you passing-wise, obviously because you were the major threat from midfield. And again, there's something else we used to work on, just speaking about it now, and it was specifically me. Because you played left of the three, and yes, I know Essien played the right, but he was still more of a player who stayed in that position, whereas you'd make that run there. Yeah. And the big problem, I think, for anyone playing against Chelsea was when the ball went to sort of Kalu, Duff or Robin on this right side, because of the system you played 4-3-3, Drogba would probably come over this side, where the ball side was. And I think the big thing for us that we used to work on a lot, my job was to cover Sammy a little bit, but almost where's Frank Lampard? Because we were never a big believer in Liverpool of, people talk about go with your runners. But it was never a big thing for us that if you made a run in the box from deep, our midfielder had to come all the way back. But yeah, I'm a spare man. We've got two centre-backs playing against one striker. OK, so I've got to be... As soon as the ball goes there, yes, I've got to open... Where's Frank Lampard?